Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever stood in front of an ancient structure? A ruin, a wall, a stone older than memory, and felt like it was watching you? Not just existing, not just surviving, but waiting. Because if you've ever felt that quiet unease, that subtle sense that something about our past doesn't fully add up, then this journey is for you. Most of us were taught a version of history that feels settled, clean, complete. Dates memorized, civilizations neatly categorized, progress moving forward in a straight line. But what if that version is only the surface? What if beneath the monuments we admire, beneath the stones we photograph, lies a story far older, far stranger, and far more incomplete than we've ever been told? Tonight, we are not here to rewrite history. We are here to question it. Across deserts, mountains, jungles, and coastlines, there exist structures so massive, so precise, and so enduring that they quietly challenge everything we think we know about the ancient world. Stones weighing hundreds of tons, walls aligned with the stars, underground cities carved deeper than modern basements, precision that seems to defy the tools supposedly used to create it. And these structures are not isolated. They appear again and again, across continents, across cultures that never met, across thousands of years. Coincidence or something else? Tonight we follow that question, not to find easy answers, but to uncover the cracks where answers refuse to form. And our journey begins not with a famous pyramid or a well-known ruin, but with a structure most people have never heard of. Stretching across the windswept plains of northeastern Iran, where the land dissolves into red earth and endless sky, lies a scar carved into the landscape, so vast it disappears into the horizon. From above, it looks almost natural. From the ground, it feels impossible. This is the Great Wall of Gorgan. At first glance, it doesn't command the same attention as its more famous counterpart in China. There are no crowds here, no postcards, no cinematic montages, just silence, wind, and a long, rust-colored line cutting across the land like the spine of a buried giant. But step closer, and the illusion of simplicity vanishes. This wall stretches nearly 200 kilometers, longer than many national borders. It runs from the foothills of the Alborz Mountains all the way to the edge of the Caspian Sea. Millions upon millions of fired bricks form its body, each one nearly identical in size, composition, and placement. Uniformity on a scale that demands organization. Precision on a scale that demands planning. And resources on a scale that demands power. The soil here is rich with iron, giving the wall its deep crimson color. At sunset, the bricks seem to glow faintly, as if holding onto the warmth of centuries. It doesn't feel abandoned, it feels dormant. Mainstream historians attribute the wall to the Sasanian Empire, built sometime between the 5th and 6th centuries AD. According to accepted explanations, it was constructed as a defensive barrier, a response to nomadic invasions from the north, a fortified boundary meant to protect the empire's heartland. On paper, that explanation works, until you start asking how. This was not a simple wall. It was a system. More than 30 massive fortresses are spaced along its length with near geometric regularity. Each fortress required housing, supplies, storage, and water. To support them, engineers constructed an elaborate network of canals, diverting rivers across vast distances with remarkable accuracy. Water flowed where the land said it shouldn't. Bricks were fired in quantities that rival industrial production. Labor was organized with a level of coordination that feels almost modern. For a society operating without engines, electricity, or modern surveying tools, the logistical demands are staggering. So staggering, in fact, that researchers still debate how such coordination was achieved in a region often described as peripheral to the ancient world's great powers. And then there's the silence. Despite the wall's immense scale, references to it in surviving historical texts are strangely rare. Contemporary chroniclers described wars, kings, ceremonies, and cities in vivid detail, yet this colossal structure barely earns a mention. Why? Was it considered too ordinary to record? Too secret to document? Or was its story already ancient even then? Excavations in the late 20th century uncovered details that complicate the narrative further. Brick dimensions remain consistent across enormous distances, suggesting standardized production methods rarely seen in that era. Certain sections of the wall show signs of rapid construction, while others display meticulous craftsmanship, as if different hands or different knowledge were involved. Some segments align with natural features in ways that go beyond defensive necessity, not simply following terrain, but interacting with it, integrating rivers, slopes, and elevation with a precision that hints at a deeper design philosophy. And then there are the questions no one can answer. Why build something so monumental when smaller fortifications would have sufficed? Why invest resources on such a scale for a frontier that shifted constantly? And why does this wall feel less like a reaction and more like an inheritance? A few researchers have quietly suggested that Sasanian engineers may have expanded upon something older, a foundation whose origins were already lost by the time they arrived. Others point to striking parallels with massive linear earthworks found in distant regions: Britain, Central Asia, even the Near East. Walls that stretch beyond immediate necessity. Walls that seem to mark something rather than block something. Fringe theories go further, proposing shared architectural impulses across civilizations separated by oceans and millennia. Not shared contact, but shared understanding. A recognition of boundaries, alignments, and space that transcends culture. These ideas remain unproven, but they linger. Standing beside the wall as the wind moves through broken battlements, you don't feel like you're looking at a military structure. You feel like you're standing beside a question written in brick and earth. Who built this, really? And what did they know that we no longer do? As dusk settles over the plains of Gorgon, the wall casts a long, narrow shadow that seems to stretch endlessly into the past. It doesn't offer answers. It doesn't demand belief. It simply exists. And that may be the most unsettling part of all. Because if structures like this challenge our understanding of what ancient societies were capable of, then Gorgon is only the beginning. As the red earth fades behind us and the wind carries its unanswered questions across the plains, our journey now turns east, toward stone cliffs carved not with bricks, but with devotion itself. Here, where living rock was transformed into something both sacred and unsettling, another mystery waits in silence. And what we find there will only deepen the question we've just begun to ask. The stone that learned to listen. As the crimson plains of Gorgon slip quietly behind us, the world begins to change. The land rises. The air cools. Stone replaces soil. Our journey now carries us eastward, across ancient trade routes and forgotten borders, into the heart of China, where history does not merely rest on the surface, but stares back at you from the cliffs themselves. Here, along the banks of the Yi River in Henan province, towering limestone walls rise like a frozen wave. At first, they appear untouched, natural, silent. But as morning light creeps across the rock face, shadows begin to separate from stone. Faces emerge. Thousands of them, some no larger than your hand, others taller than a modern building, all carved directly from living rock. This is the Longmen Grottos, one of the largest and most concentrated collections of rock-cut art on Earth. More than 100,000 statues, thousands of caves and niches, entire cliff faces hollowed, reshaped, and transformed into something that feels less like architecture and more like a conversation between humanity and stone. Standing here, sound behaves differently. The river below moves gently, yet its presence seems amplified. Even a whisper feels as though it travels farther than it should. The air itself feels hesitant, as if this place was designed not just to be seen, but to be experienced. According to mainstream history, work at Longmen began in the late 5th century AD during the Northern Wei dynasty, when Buddhism surged through China, reshaping culture, politics, and art. Emperors, nobles, monks, and ordinary citizens sponsored carvings as acts of devotion. Generation after generation added their mark to the cliffs. On the surface, the explanation seems straightforward. Until you look closer, the scale alone is staggering. Entire sections of cliff have been carved inward with astonishing uniformity. Statues maintain consistent proportions across centuries. Facial expressions remain harmonious despite being produced by different hands, under different rulers, across different eras. This wasn't random devotion. It was coordinated vision. Some caves contain figures so delicately rendered that individual folds of fabric and curls of hair remain visible more than 1,000 years later. Others house monumental Buddhas nearly 50 feet tall, carved with geometric precision, and positioned as if aligned along invisible axes. And those axes matter. Researchers have noted that certain major statues align with the path of the sun at specific times of year. Light enters select caves at precise angles, illuminating faces and symbols with uncanny timing. Whether intentional or coincidental, the effect is impossible to ignore. Then there is the question of how. Limestone is unforgiving. Remove too much material in the wrong place and the entire structure collapses. Yet here, thousands of cavities were carved into vertical cliffs without triggering catastrophic failure. Ceilings remain stable. Walls remain intact. Weight distribution appears carefully calculated. This level of precision implies not just artistry, but engineering. Traditional explanations credit iron tools, scaffolding, and vast labor forces. And certainly, human effort played a role. But effort alone does not explain consistency. It does not explain how techniques appear to advance suddenly in certain chambers, only to revert again nearby. In some sections, carving methods shift dramatically. Lines become cleaner, proportions more refined, stone surfaces smoother. These changes do not always align with known dynastic transitions or artistic movements. It's as if different knowledge entered the site briefly, then vanished. Underground passages discovered in more recent decades add another layer of mystery. Some tunnels connect caves in ways that serve no obvious practical function. Their trajectories are oddly symmetrical, their angles precise. Some appear to have been carved before the statues they connect, not after. Were these service corridors, structural reinforcements, or something else entirely? Even more intriguing are the acoustics. Certain chambers amplify sound in ways that feel deliberate. A low hum can resonate across space, vibrating stone and body alike. Chanting monks would have experienced these caves not only visually, but physically, sound waves interacting with carved geometry. Was this intentional design, or an accidental byproduct of skilled excavation? Some researchers believe the builders possessed a deeper understanding of resonance, vibration, and spatial harmony. Not scientific in the modern sense, but experiential. Knowledge gained through observation, repetition, and tradition. Others go further, suggesting that Longmen may have been shaped around an already sacred landscape. That the cliffs themselves were chosen for properties we no longer measure: energy flows, geological resonance, or alignment with celestial cycles. These ideas remain speculative, but they persist because certain puzzles refuse to dissolve. For example, the sheer volume of stone removed from these cliffs is enormous, enough to fill valleys. Yet nearby debris fields are surprisingly scarce. Where did all that material go? How was it transported? Why is there no clear archaeological footprint matching the scale of excavation? Some suggest the stone was reused for other projects now lost to time. Others wonder whether erosion patterns obscure evidence we've yet to recognize. Then there is time itself. Weathering on some carvings appears inconsistent with their accepted age. A few figures show signs of erosion that suggest they may be older than the periods they're officially assigned to. Could there have been earlier phases of carving, undocumented, absorbed into later work? Could Longmen have been sacred long before tools ever touched its cliffs? As afternoon light shifts, shadows stretch across the carved faces. Expressions change subtly. A serene gaze becomes contemplative. A calm smile feels knowing. It becomes difficult to see these statues as static. They feel aware. Standing among them, you're struck by a strange realization. This place was not built for speed. It was built for endurance, for centuries of hands, for continuity of vision across generations who trusted that what they began would be carried forward. That alone is extraordinary. But even more extraordinary is how much remains unexplained. Why do some chambers feel almost mathematically perfect? Why does sound behave so predictably in spaces carved without modern instruments? Why does this place feel less like a monument and more like a system? As evening settles over the Yi River, the grottos fall quiet. The statues return to shadow. The questions linger. Longmen does not shout its mystery. It whispers it. And those whispers follow us as we leave the cliffs behind. Because if stone can be shaped to listen, if rock can be carved to resonate, then perhaps these structures were never meant to be understood at a glance. Perhaps they were meant to be experienced slowly, over lifetimes, not visits. And as we turn westward once more, toward a valley where stones weigh more than modern machines can lift, one truth becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Whatever built these places, it understood something we are still trying to remember. The stones that should not move. As the echoes of Longmen's carved cliffs fade into memory, our journey moves west again, across deserts, ancient caravan routes and lands once stitched together by forgotten empires. The air grows warmer. The soil turns pale. The mountains flatten into wide, open plains. And then, rising from the Bekaa Valley of modern Lebanon, something appears that feels less like a ruin and more like a contradiction. At first glance, it looks familiar. Columns, temples, classical symmetry, the kind of architecture we associate with Rome. But that illusion collapses the moment you look beneath it. Because beneath the elegance of carved capitals and towering pillars lies a foundation so massive, so heavy, and so precise that even modern engineering struggles to explain it. This is Baalbek, and at its core lies one of the most unsettling constructions in the ancient world. The trilithon, 3 stones, each weighing over 800 tons, set side by side, lifted high into a foundation wall, fitted together so precisely that not even a blade of grass can pass between their seams. And they are not alone. Nearby lies another monolith, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighing more than 1,000 tons, partially quarried, never moved, abandoned as if the builders simply stopped. Standing before these stones, scale becomes meaningless. Your body cannot process it. Your mind resists it. They don't feel like building materials. They feel like geological features. Except they are. They were cut, shaped, transported, positioned, deliberately. Mainstream history tells us that Baalbek evolved over centuries, from Phoenician sacred ground to Hellenistic sanctuary to Roman temple complex. The Romans, master engineers of the ancient world, are credited with transforming it into one of the grandest religious sites of the empire. And the columns above are Roman. The carvings are Roman. The artistry is Roman. But the foundation stones, those are different. They are older, heavier, cruder in appearance, yet more precise in placement. Even Roman construction manuals, which survive in fragments, contain no instructions for moving stones of this scale. The question is not whether ancient people could move heavy stones. They could. The question is why they would choose stones this heavy, when smaller ones would have worked just as well? Why choose extreme difficulty over practicality? Why design a foundation using blocks that exceed the limits of standard engineering logic? Roman engineers were efficient. They were pragmatic. They optimized resources. This is not optimization. This is obsession, or inheritance, or something else entirely. Some archaeologists believe the Romans built on top of an older platform, one that already existed when they arrived. A structure whose purpose they may not have fully understood, but chose to incorporate rather than dismantle. If that is true, then the most mysterious part of Baalbek is not Roman at all. It is something older and lost. The quarry deepens the mystery. Less than a kilometer away, another colossal stone lies half-carved, still attached to the bedrock. Tool marks are visible, clean, precise, purposeful. The builders knew exactly what they were doing. Until they didn't. Why abandon a stone after shaping it? Why leave it behind when others were moved? Was it too heavy even for them? Did priorities change? Did something interrupt the project? Or was it never meant to be moved at all? Standing in the quarry, the silence feels heavy, not empty, suspended. The stone doesn't feel abandoned. It feels paused. The engineering questions are endless. How were these blocks cut with such straight edges? How were they transported across uneven terrain? How were they lifted into position with such precision? How were they aligned without modern surveying instruments? Crane theories exist. Pulley theories exist. Ramp theories exist. But none fully account for the scale, weight, and precision simultaneously. Modern cranes struggle with loads of this magnitude. And ancient cranes, even at their most advanced, were never designed for stones approaching 1,000 tons. Some researchers argue that Baalbek represents the extreme edge of human ingenuity, a civilization pushing itself to its absolute limits. Others suggest something more uncomfortable, that the knowledge used here did not originate here, that these stones represent a legacy, not an invention, a continuation of techniques passed down from an earlier culture whose records did not survive. This idea is controversial, but it persists because Baalbek refuses to fit cleanly into any single historical narrative. The Romans were brilliant builders, but they did not typically build like this. They favored modular construction, repeatable systems, standardized blocks. Baalbek's foundation is none of those things. It is singular, unique, unrepeated. As sunset spreads across the valley, the massive stones glow faintly in golden light. Shadows stretch along their seams, emphasizing their impossible scale. And suddenly, the columns above them feel almost fragile by comparison. Beautiful, but fragile. It's as if the foundation belongs to a different era, a different mindset, a different understanding of what stone was for. Not just structure, not just support, but permanence, something meant to outlast empires. And that is perhaps the most unsettling thought of all. Because civilizations rise and fall, empires collapse, languages vanish, beliefs fade, but these stones remain. They do not carry inscriptions. They do not tell stories. They do not explain themselves. They simply endure. As we walk among them, one question follows every step. Were these stones the limit of human engineering? Or the evidence of something we no longer understand? As the valley darkens and Baalbek slips into shadow, its foundations remain silent, immovable, and unresolved. And as we leave Lebanon behind, crossing into the rugged highlands of southeastern Turkey, we carry that question with us. Because our next destination will take us not to a valley, not to a wall, not to a cliff, but to the top of a mountain, where statues stare into eternity, where stone meets sky, and where a king tried to make himself immortal. The mountain that watches the sky. As the immense stones of Baalbek sink back into the valley behind us, the land begins to rise once more. Roads narrow. The air thins. Civilization feels farther away. Our journey now carries us northward into the rugged highlands of southeastern Turkey, where the Taurus mountains cut sharply into the sky, and the wind seems to speak in a language older than memory. Here, on a remote summit more than 2,000 meters above sea level, lies a place that does not feel accidental. From a distance, it looks like a mountain reshaped by nature, a conical mound of broken stone rising unnaturally from the peak. But as you climb closer, the symmetry becomes undeniable. This is Mount Nemrut, and at its summit stands one of the strangest monuments ever attempted by human hands. Crowning the mountain is a vast artificial tumulus, millions of crushed limestone fragments piled into a towering cone nearly 50 meters high. At its base sit colossal statues, gods, kings, animals, and guardians carved from massive stone blocks, some towering over 20 feet tall. Their bodies remain upright. Their heads lie scattered. Faces stare outward in every direction, gazing across valleys, mountains, and sky, as if standing eternal watch over the world below. Archaeologists date the site to the 1st century BC, built under the reign of King Antiochus I of Commagene, a ruler obsessed with legacy, divinity, and cosmic order. Antiochus sought to unite Greek and Persian traditions, declaring himself both king and god, linking his bloodline to Zeus, Apollo, and Ahura Mazda. Nemrut was meant to be his tomb, but it was also meant to be something more. Something eternal. Standing here, the isolation is overwhelming. Winds howl across the summit. Clouds move fast. The horizon stretches endlessly in all directions. Even today, reaching this place feels deliberate, intentional, as though the mountain itself resists casual visitors. That resistance raises the first question. How did ancient builders transport multi-ton stone blocks to the top of a mountain this high, using only rudimentary tools, animals, and human labor? How were statues of this scale carved, lifted, and positioned in an environment where weather alone threatens survival? There are no nearby quarries large enough to explain the stone volume, no clear evidence of permanent roads, only faint traces of paths carved into the mountainside, worn smooth by time. The logistics alone border on the impossible. And then there is the arrangement. The statues are not random. They are placed with deliberate orientation. Many face east and west, aligned with the rising and setting sun. Researchers have noted that during solstices, sunlight strikes specific figures in precise ways, illuminating faces and inscriptions at carefully chosen moments. This was not decoration. It was choreography. Antiochus left inscriptions explaining his vision, a sanctuary where gods and men would meet, where rituals would bind heaven and earth, where his soul would live on among the stars. But even his words fail to explain the full scope of what was built. The tumulus itself is a mystery. Beneath the mound of stone lies, presumably, a burial chamber. Yet despite decades of exploration using probes, tunnels, and modern technology, no confirmed tomb has ever been found. It is as if the mountain swallowed its secret. The crushed stones that form the mound shift constantly, making excavation dangerous and unstable. Each attempt to reach the center has been thwarted, as if the structure was designed to resist intrusion. Was this intentional? Was the tomb never meant to be found? Or was the mound itself the point? Some researchers believe the tumulus was designed not to conceal a body, but to symbolize ascent, a man-made mountain reaching toward the heavens, blurring the boundary between earth and sky. Others propose that the true chamber lies elsewhere, hidden, offset, deliberately misleading. And then there are the heads. Why are they separated? Earthquakes may explain some displacement, but not all. Some heads appear deliberately placed away from their bodies, arranged as if meant to be seen independently. Their expressions are calm, unblinking, detached. Standing among them, it feels less like a ruin and more like a gathering frozen in time. There is also the matter of precision. Despite centuries of exposure to snow, ice, wind, and seismic activity, many of the statues remain remarkably intact. Their joints align cleanly. Their surfaces retain detail. Their placement remains stable. This level of durability suggests careful engineering, an understanding of weight distribution, balance, and stone behavior that exceeds simple monument building. Some researchers have suggested that Nemrut functioned as more than a tomb, that it may have served as a celestial marker, an observatory, or even a ritual calendar. Alignments with stars and constellations have been proposed, though definitive proof remains elusive. Yet the idea persists because it feels consistent. Nemrut does not feel random. It feels encoded. The blending of cultures, the astronomical alignments, the deliberate isolation, all point toward a monument designed to communicate something across time. Not just to gods, but to the future. And that brings us to the most unsettling possibility. What if Antiochus was not inventing something new, but restoring something old? What if the mountain was already sacred, already marked, already understood in ways now lost? Some fringe researchers suggest that Nemrut may sit atop a much older site, one whose significance predates recorded history. That Antiochus, rather than creating meaning, may have been claiming it. These ideas remain speculative. But standing here, surrounded by broken gods and watching the sky darken above a man-made mountain, it becomes difficult to believe this place was built for a single man. It feels larger than ego, larger than politics, larger than empire. As the sun sinks toward the horizon, light washes across the stone faces. Shadows stretch long across the summit. For a brief moment, the statues seem almost alive, as if remembering something they cannot say. And then the light fades. The mountain grows quiet. Nemrut does not offer answers. It offers perspective, a reminder that ancient builders were not only capable of shaping stone, but of shaping meaning, of embedding belief, alignment, and ambition into landscapes themselves. And as we descend from the summit, leaving the watching faces behind, one thought follows us down the mountain paths. If ancient people could shape mountains to speak with the sky, what else did they know how to do? Because our next destination will take us not upward, but downward, deep beneath the earth, into a place where entire cities were carved away from stone, hidden from the world above. And what we find there will challenge everything we think we understand about survival, secrecy, and ancient knowledge. The city beneath the earth. As we descend from the windswept summit of Mount Nemrut, leaving behind its silent gods and fractured crowns, the world begins to close in again. The sky narrows. The mountains soften. The land grows quieter. Our journey now leads us not upward toward the heavens, but downward into the earth itself. Into a place where survival demanded invisibility, where entire communities vanished beneath the surface, and where stone was shaped not to impress the sky, but to escape it. In the heart of central Turkey, beneath a landscape of gentle hills and volcanic formations known as fairy chimneys, lies something that does not announce itself. There are no towering walls here, no statues watching the horizon, no monuments visible from afar, just small openings in the ground, and beneath them a city. This is Kuyu. From above, the land feels ordinary. Villages dot the plains, fields stretch toward the horizon. Life moves quietly, unaware of what lies below. But step through a narrow entrance carved into the rock, and the world transforms. The air cools instantly. Light fades. Stone surrounds you on all sides. Corridors twist downward in unexpected directions, narrowing suddenly, then opening into vast chambers carved with astonishing precision. The walls are smooth, the ceilings carefully shaped. The floor slopes gently, guiding water and movement with subtle intention. This is not a cave. This is architecture. Derinkuyu descends more than 60 meters into the earth, at least 8 levels deep, forming a subterranean network capable of sheltering tens of thousands of people. Kitchens, stables, storage rooms, wine presses, chapels, schools, ventilation shafts. Even massive stone doors, circular slabs weighing several tons, that could be rolled into place to seal off entire sections of the city. According to mainstream archaeology, Derinkuyu was expanded during the Byzantine period, roughly between the 5th and 10th centuries AD, used by Christian communities seeking refuge from invasion and persecution. And on the surface, that explanation fits. But only on the surface. Because the deeper you go, the stranger it becomes. The engineering alone is staggering. More than 100 ventilation shafts descend from the surface, some reaching the lowest levels. Fresh air circulates naturally through the entire complex, even in chambers far removed from any entrance. Temperature remains stable year-round. Water is accessed without contamination. Waste is managed. Structural integrity is maintained across levels carved into soft volcanic tuff, a material that can collapse easily if misjudged. This was not rushed construction. This was long-term planning. And planning of this scale raises difficult questions. How did ancient builders calculate airflow without modern instruments? How did they prevent collapse while removing thousands of tons of rock? How did they coordinate excavation across levels without losing orientation underground? Even today, tunneling projects require advanced surveying, reinforcement, and constant monitoring. Yet Derinkuyu stands, centuries later, intact. Some chambers are so large that they feel impossible underground. Vaulted ceilings rise high above. Pillars support weight with elegant simplicity. Angles are precise. Corners are deliberate. And then there is the scale. Derinkuyu is not alone. More than 30 underground cities have been discovered across Cappadocia, many connected by tunnels stretching for kilometers. Some appear to predate known historical occupation. Others show signs of repeated expansion, as if knowledge was passed down and reused over generations. This suggests something unsettling. That subterranean living was not a temporary solution, but a tradition. And traditions are not born overnight. They evolve. The deeper levels of Derinkuyu feel older, rougher in places, different in style. Some researchers believe the lowest sections may predate Byzantine use by centuries, perhaps even millennia. Could earlier civilizations have begun these cities? And if so, why? The official narrative suggests defense, hiding from raiders, invaders, or religious persecution. But that explanation struggles to account for the sheer depth and permanence of the structures. You don't carve a city this vast simply to hide for a season. This was meant to last. Some rooms show signs of ritual use, chambers with unusual acoustics, niches carved too carefully to be purely functional, symbols etched into walls whose meanings remain unclear. Sound behaves strangely here. A whisper can travel down corridors, footsteps echo unpredictably, silence feels amplified, heavy, almost alive. Standing in the deepest levels, far removed from sunlight, one cannot escape the feeling that this place was designed not only for protection, but for control. Control of movement, control of access, control of life itself. And then there is the question of psychology. How did thousands of people live underground for extended periods? Children, animals, elders, entire communities sealed away from the sun. This required not only physical infrastructure, but social structure, belief, and discipline. It required planning for food, light, water, waste, air, and morale. In other words, it required knowledge far beyond simple survival. Some researchers have proposed that underground cities like Derinkuyu may have served purposes beyond refuge, perhaps as ceremonial centers, storage vaults, or sanctuaries during times of environmental instability. Others have suggested more radical possibilities, that these cities were built in response to threats not yet fully understood, prolonged climate events, social collapse, or dangers that made the surface world temporarily uninhabitable. There is no definitive evidence for such claims. But there is also no definitive explanation for why these cities were built to such depth, complexity, and permanence. One thing is clear. This was not improvisation. This was intentional. As you move through Derinkuyu, the sensation is unmistakable. This place was designed by people who understood the earth intimately, who knew how stone behaved, how air moved, how water flowed, who knew how to disappear. And that realization leads to an uncomfortable thought. If ancient people were capable of creating entire hidden worlds beneath our feet, what else might they have built and lost? How much of human history lies buried, not because it was primitive, but because it was meant to be unseen? As we ascend slowly back toward the surface, light returns in stages. The air warms, sounds of the modern world filter back in. But the feeling does not leave. Derinkuyu stays with you. Not as a ruin, but as a reminder. A reminder that history is not always written in monuments and towers. Sometimes it is written in silence, in stone beneath stone, in cities built to be forgotten. And as we step back into the daylight of Cappadocia, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. If entire civilizations could vanish underground, then the past we see may only be a fraction of what once existed. Because our next destination will take us not beneath the earth, but beneath the sea-washed island of Malta, where another underground structure waits, carved not for survival, but for something far more enigmatic. The temple beneath the island. As we leave the hidden depths of Cappadocia behind and return fully to the world of sun and sky, the journey carries us west, across the Mediterranean, to an island that has witnessed more than 7,000 years of human history. Malta. At first glance, it feels familiar. Warm stone buildings, narrow streets, the steady rhythm of waves against limestone cliffs. Life here moves at a human pace, shaped by sea and sun. But beneath the modern city of Paula, beneath asphalt and traffic and ordinary homes, something else exists. Something older than the pyramids. Something that should not be here, yet is. There is no dramatic entrance, no towering ruins, just a modest doorway once uncovered by accident in the early 20th century. Step inside and the temperature drops. Light fades. The world above disappears. This is the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum, a vast underground complex carved entirely from solid limestone more than 5,000 years ago. Not assembled, not stacked, carved, downward. The deeper you descend, the more unreal it becomes. Corridors curve gently instead of running straight. Chambers open into one another like organs inside a body. Walls are smooth, rounded, and deliberate, as if shaped to feel alive rather than rigid. Some rooms are small and intimate. Others expand suddenly into wide ceremonial spaces, with high ceilings and carved niches that feel purposeful, not decorative. This was not a shelter. This was not a storage space. This was something else entirely. Archaeologists date the hypogeum to roughly 4,000–2,500 BC, placing it deep within Malta's Neolithic period, a time when humans were supposedly limited to stone tools, basic agriculture, and simple dwellings. And yet this structure contradicts all of that. The hypogeum descends through 3 distinct levels, each more complex than the last. Staircases curve downward with careful geometry. Chambers align vertically across floors, as if planned together from the very beginning. The lowest levels feel different. Heavier, older. Sound behaves strangely here. A whisper in one chamber carries clearly into another. Low tones resonate through the rock, vibrating the chest and skull. Certain frequencies seem to amplify themselves, lingering long after the sound is made. This is not accidental. Acoustic tests conducted in the 20th century revealed that specific chambers resonate most strongly at frequencies associated with human vocalization, particularly chanting. Standing in those rooms, sound does not merely echo. It envelops. It alters perception. It turns stone into an instrument. Which leads to an unavoidable question. How did Neolithic builders, with no metal tools, no written language, no known mathematics, carve a structure with such precise acoustic properties? How did they shape space in ways that interact so deliberately with sound, body, and mind? The walls themselves deepen the mystery. Red ochre markings remain visible in some chambers, spirals, dots, abstract patterns whose meanings are still debated. Unlike typical cave art, these symbols are placed with intention, integrated into architectural space rather than simply painted on walls. Some chambers mimic the design of above-ground temples found elsewhere on Malta, complete with carved doorways, columns, and altars. But here, everything is inverted. This is a temple turned inward, a sacred space beneath the earth. Thousands of human remains were discovered here, suggesting the hypogeum functioned as a burial complex. But the design goes far beyond funerary necessity. Why carve ceremonial architecture underground? Why create acoustically active spaces for the dead? Why invest such effort, precision, and labor into a place no one was meant to live in? Even more puzzling is the craftsmanship. Walls are smooth and curved, not jagged. Corners are rounded. Floors are level. Ceilings are shaped to distribute weight safely across chambers. Removing this much stone without causing collapse would have required deep understanding of limestone behavior, where it fractures, where it holds, how pressure travels. There is no evidence of trial-and-error collapse. This suggests planning, and planning suggests knowledge. Some researchers believe the hypogeum was designed for ritual initiation, ceremonies involving sound, darkness, and altered states of consciousness. Others suggest it functioned as a symbolic womb, a place of rebirth, reflecting cycles of life and death deeply embedded in Neolithic belief systems. These interpretations are speculative, but they arise because the hypogeum resists purely practical explanations. Then there is the matter of alignment. Certain chambers appear to channel light during specific times of year. Others align vertically in ways that suggest intentional geometry across levels. Measurements repeat, ratios appear. Patterns emerge, and patterns do not happen by accident. Perhaps most unsettling is what remains unexplored. Sections of the hypogeum are inaccessible, either too fragile or deliberately sealed. Some chambers descend deeper than publicly accessible areas. Ground-penetrating surveys hint at voids beyond mapped spaces. What lies there is unknown. What was never found is equally important. No inscriptions. No clear instructions. No written explanations. Only stone. And silence. Standing in the deepest chamber, far removed from the surface world, something becomes clear. This place was never meant to be understood quickly. It was meant to be experienced slowly. In darkness, in sound, in ritual. And that realization changes everything. Because if Neolithic societies possessed the knowledge to carve entire ceremonial worlds beneath the earth, worlds that manipulate sound, space, and perception, then our understanding of primitive humanity collapses. These were not simple people fumbling in the dark. They were deliberate, capable, visionary, and perhaps connected to ideas we have long forgotten. As we ascend back toward daylight, leaving the hypogeum behind, the sunlight feels almost intrusive. The modern world returns abruptly, traffic, voices, movement. But something lingers. A sense that this island holds memories deeper than its surface suggests. Because Malta is not alone. Across the world, underground ceremonial spaces appear again and again, carved, aligned, resonant. And the pattern continues. As we step back into the open air, one thought follows us relentlessly. If ancient people carved temples beneath the earth to shape sound and consciousness, what other knowledge did they encode in stone? Because our next destination will take us to a place where stone was not carved downward, but carved entirely out of itself. A monument shaped from a single piece of living rock. A feat so audacious it still defies explanation. And what we find there will challenge everything we think we know about ancient limits. The mountain that was turned into a temple. As we leave the shadowed chambers beneath Malta behind, our journey shifts east once more, across seas, deserts, and centuries, toward a land where stone was not hollowed, hidden, or buried, but removed, where an entire mountain was carved away to reveal something impossible. In the western Indian state of Maharashtra, carved into the volcanic cliffs of Ellora, stands a structure that does not look built. It looks uncovered, as if someone peeled away the earth itself and revealed a temple that had always been waiting inside. This is the Kailasa temple, and it is unlike anything else on earth. From above, the scale is almost disorienting. A vast rectangular trench plunges into the bedrock, nearly 100 feet deep. Within it rises a complete freestanding temple, towers, halls, shrines, pillars, stairways, all carved from a single continuous mass of stone. Not assembled, not stacked, not repaired, carved, top to bottom. Imagine standing at the edge of that cliff centuries ago, looking down at solid basalt and deciding not to build on it, but to remove everything around the temple until only the temple remained. That is what the builders of Kailasa did. According to mainstream history, the temple was constructed in the 8th century AD under the Rashtrakuta dynasty. During the reign of King Krishna I, it was dedicated to Shiva and designed to represent Mount Kailash, the cosmic mountain at the center of the universe. The symbolism is grand, but the engineering is staggering. To create Kailasa, an estimated 400,000 tons of rock had to be removed, and not blasted, not fractured, but carefully cut, shaped, and cleared away, all without collapsing the structure being revealed. No scaffolding marks remain. No construction ramps have been found. No written plans survive. And perhaps most puzzling of all, no debris field exists. Where did all that stone go? The answer has never been convincingly explained. Standing inside the complex, the precision is overwhelming. Columns rise perfectly vertical. Ceilings are level. Reliefs are deeply carved, depicting entire mythological narratives with clarity and motion. Statues emerge from the walls with lifelike proportion. Elephants appear to support the temple's base, their bodies carved so realistically they seem to strain under invisible weight. And yet all of it, every pillar, every carving, every staircase, remains part of the same original rock. There are no joints, no seams, no structural breaks. This means the builders had to visualize the entire temple in advance, in 3 dimensions, before removing a single piece of stone. One mistake, one miscalculation, one fracture, and the entire project would have failed. This level of spatial planning exceeds what even modern construction teams attempt without digital modeling. How did ancient artisans accomplish it? Traditional explanations credit master architects, generations of skilled laborers, and simple tools, chisels, hammers, wedges. Time and devotion, we're told, were enough. But time alone does not solve geometry. Effort alone does not explain alignment. And devotion alone does not prevent catastrophic collapse. Certain features of colossa raise difficult questions. Drainage channels are carved into the structure, allowing monsoon rains to flow safely away without eroding key supports. Courtyards are proportioned with mathematical consistency. Vertical walls descend dozens of meters without deviation. This suggests more than artistry. It suggests engineering knowledge, an understanding of stress, load, and material behavior. And then there is the method. Unlike most monuments, colossa was carved from the top down. Builders began at the highest point and worked downward, removing stone while preserving form. This approach eliminates the possibility of trial and error. You cannot test from the bottom. You cannot correct mistakes. Everything depends on foresight. Some sections of the temple show carving styles that differ subtly from others. Certain reliefs appear more refined, certain edges sharper. Scholars suggest multiple teams worked simultaneously, guided by strict design rules. But those rules, whatever they were, have been lost. No manuals, no blueprints, no instructions passed down. Just the result. And that result has endured earthquakes, monsoons, centuries of neglect and modern pollution, yet remains structurally sound. That endurance forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility. What if ancient builders possessed techniques we no longer understand? Not machines, not magic, but knowledge. Knowledge of stone, of leverage, of geometry, of rhythm and repetition, of how to remove material without weakening what remains. Some researchers believe colossa reflects a tradition far older than the Rashtrakutas, knowledge inherited and perfected over generations. Others suggest the temple was an experiment never repeated because its methods were too demanding, too risky, too dependent on rare expertise. And yet, similar monolithic projects appear elsewhere. Petra, Abu Simbel, the rock-cut temples of Lalibela. Again and again, ancient builders choose the hardest possible method, not because it was necessary, but because it was meaningful. Monolithic construction carries symbolism. One stone, one form, one continuity. No joints to fail, no pieces to separate. A structure born whole. Perhaps colossa was not just a temple, but a statement. A declaration that humans could shape mountains to reflect cosmic order. That the divine was not placed upon the earth, but revealed from within it. As sunlight moves across the complex, shadows animate the carvings. Reliefs seem to shift, figures appear to move. The temple feels alive not because it breathes, but because it responds to light and time. Standing there, surrounded by carved myth and living rock, it becomes difficult to accept the idea that this was merely a religious building. It feels like a culmination, a peak, the end of a long line of knowledge, reaching back further than records can trace. And like many peaks, it was never surpassed. No later civilization attempted anything quite like colossa again. Not at this scale, not with this risk, not with this audacity. As we step away from the temple, one realization settles in quietly. Ancient builders were not always trying to do what was easiest. They were trying to do what was enduring. And endurance requires understanding. Deep understanding of materials, of space, of time. If colossa represents what humanity could achieve when knowledge, belief, and skill converged, then the question becomes unavoidable. What else did ancient people know, and why did that knowledge vanish? Because our next destination will take us back to Egypt. But not to the pyramids. Instead, we descend once more beneath the surface, into a place of water, shadow, and stone pillars, where Egypt's own understanding of the underworld was carved into reality. And what waits there will blur the line between tomb, temple, and something far older. The temple beneath the water. As the living mountain of colossal fades behind us, its carved gods and towering reliefs lingering in the imagination, our journey returns to a land where stone and eternity have always been inseparable. Egypt. But not the Egypt of postcards and pyramids. Not the Egypt of sunlit deserts and familiar silhouettes. This journey takes us south, along the Nile, to a place that feels deliberately hidden, tucked behind one of Egypt's most celebrated temples, almost as if it was never meant to be found. Here at Abydos, one of the most sacred cities of ancient Egypt, lies a structure that does not rise toward the sky. It descends, quietly, deliberately, into the earth. This is the Osirian. At first glance, it appears deceptively simple. A sunken chamber, massive stone blocks, shallow water pooled at its center, no towering reliefs, no painted hieroglyphs announcing power or conquest. But the longer you stand here, the stranger it becomes. Because nothing about this place behaves like a conventional Egyptian temple. The Osirian is constructed from enormous granite blocks, some weighing dozens of tons. They are laid with precision so exact that seems nearly vanish. The stones are smooth, squared, and fitted with a level of accuracy that rivals, and in some cases exceeds, much later construction. And yet this structure lies beneath layers of sediment, as if time itself tried to bury it. Mainstream archaeology dates the Osirian to the reign of Pharaoh Seti I, around 1290 BC, suggesting it functioned as a symbolic tomb for Osiris, god of the underworld, death, and rebirth. A ritual space, a myth carved in stone. That explanation makes sense. Until you look at the architecture. The Osirian does not resemble other structures from Seti I's era. It lacks the ornate reliefs typical of the New Kingdom. Its style is stark, monumental, almost primitive, yet profoundly precise. The layout is simple but deliberate. A central platform surrounded by water. Massive stone pillars rise from the depths, supporting a roof that feels impossibly heavy for the space below. Corridors lead inward, guiding visitors deeper into shadow. Water flows naturally into the chamber, fed by the groundwater beneath Abydos. This creates a permanent pool, still, reflective, and eerily calm. Some researchers believe this water symbolized the primeval waters of creation, the cosmic abyss from which life emerged. In Egyptian mythology, Osiris was intimately tied to cycles of death and rebirth, descent and resurrection. The symbolism is powerful, but symbolism alone does not explain construction. Granite is one of the hardest stones used in ancient Egypt. Cutting it requires immense effort even with modern tools. Moving it requires coordination, leverage, and planning on a massive scale. And here, deep underground, those stones were not only moved, they were placed with precision. How did builders transport multi-ton granite blocks into a sunken chamber, align them perfectly, and support their weight in a space already below ground level? More puzzling still, how did they manage groundwater? The Osirian sits below the natural water table. Excavating such a structure would have required controlling water flow during construction, a challenge even modern engineers approach cautiously. Yet the Osirian stands. Stable, enduring, flooded but not damaged. Some Egyptologists have quietly noted that the Osirian feels older than Seti I. Its proportions, materials, and construction methods resemble much earlier structures, even pre-dynastic sites, rather than the refined temples of the New Kingdom. This has led to an uncomfortable question. What if Seti I did not build the Osirian? What if he rediscovered it? Inscriptions linking Seti I to the structure appear mainly in the corridors leading to it, not on the core granite blocks themselves. This suggests the possibility that the pharaoh restored, enclosed, or repurposed an already ancient structure. If true, then the Osirian may predate recorded Egyptian history. That idea remains controversial. but it persists because of inconsistencies that refuse to disappear. The sheer scale of the stones, the absence of decorative reliefs, the architectural style that does not match its supposed era, the presence of water integrated into the structure rather than avoided. These features do not align neatly with known New Kingdom practices. They align better with something older, something foundational. Some researchers propose that the Assyrian represents a remnant of an ancient tradition, a sacred architecture focused on subterranean spaces, water, and rebirth. A tradition preserved, adapted, and mythologized over millennia. Others suggest it may have been part of a much larger complex now buried beneath Abydos, one that predates dynastic Egypt entirely. Ground surveys hint at unexplored voids and structures beneath the site, but excavation is limited. The Assyrian remains partially submerged, partially inaccessible, and largely unexplored, which only deepens the mystery. Standing beside the still water, the reflections are unsettling. Pillars mirror themselves perfectly on the surface, creating the illusion of infinite depth. Above and below blur together. It feels less like a tomb and more like a threshold, a place designed to mark transition between life and death, between surface and underworld, between what is seen and what is remembered. And perhaps that was the point. The Assyrian does not seek attention. It does not rise proudly into the desert sun. It hides, it waits, it endures quietly beneath the layers of time. As we stand here, listening to the faint echoes of water against stone, one realization becomes unavoidable. Ancient Egyptians understood something about depth. Not just physical depth, but symbolic depth. They carved monuments into the earth not only to honor gods, but to interact with forces they believed shaped existence itself. If the Assyrian truly predates Egypt's Golden Age, then it suggests a continuity of knowledge stretching far beyond the dynasties we recognize. Knowledge inherited, revered, and carefully preserved. As we leave Abydos and follow the Nile northward, the presence of water remains with us, flowing, reflecting, shaping stone and civilization alike. Because our next destination will take us far from Egypt, to a land where stone walls rise in impossible patterns, where blocks interlock with precision that resists earthquakes, and where ancient builders shaped stone so perfectly that even modern engineers struggle to explain how. The journey continues across the ocean to the highlands of South America, and what waits there will challenge everything we think we know about the limits of human craftsmanship. The stones that refuse to fall. As the quiet waters of the Nile fade behind us, carrying echoes of buried temples and submerged pillars, our journey now crosses an ocean. The air grows thinner. The land rises sharply. The horizon fractures into jagged peaks. We arrive in the highlands of Peru, where the Andes carve the sky into sharp silhouettes and the wind never fully rests. Here, above the ancient city of Cusco, stands a structure that feels less like a ruin and more like a challenge. At first glance, it resembles a fortress. Massive walls stretch across the hillside in a series of zigzagging terraces, their scale overwhelming even from a distance. But as you approach, something feels wrong. Or rather, too right. The stones do not stack. They interlock. This is Sacsayhuaman, and its walls are among the most perplexing constructions ever achieved by human hands. Each block is enormous, some weigh over 200 tons. Many are irregular in shape, carved into complex polygons with dozens of angles. Yet each stone fits perfectly against its neighbors, leaving gaps so tight that not even a sheet of paper can slide between them. No mortar binds them. No cement fills the seams. They hold together through precision alone. Stand close, and you'll notice something even stranger. The stones are not flat. They curve. Edges bend subtly inward and outward, locking each block into place like pieces of a three-dimensional puzzle. Corners wrap around one another. Faces tilt slightly, as if designed to absorb movement rather than resist it. And that design works. For centuries, earthquakes have shaken the Andes, cities have collapsed, colonial buildings have crumbled. But these walls remain. They shift, they flex, they settle back into place. Modern engineers call this seismic-resistant design. But that term feels insufficient, because Sacsayhuaman predates modern seismic theory by hundreds of years. Mainstream history attributes the site to the Inca, built during the 15th century as both a ceremonial complex and a defensive stronghold protecting Cusco, the heart of the empire. The Inca were extraordinary builders. There is no doubt about that. They mastered stonework, road systems, terracing, and logistics across one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. And yet, even among Inca sites, Sacsayhuaman stands apart. The stones here are far larger than those used elsewhere, the precision far greater, the labor exponentially more demanding. Which raises the first question. Why? Why use stones of such massive size when smaller ones would have sufficed? Why carve irregular shapes instead of simple blocks? Why invest so much effort into perfection no one would notice from a distance? The answers are unclear. Inca oral traditions speak of ancestral builders, figures who existed before the empire, who shaped stone as if it were clay. Legends tell of stones that walked into place, guided by knowledge lost after catastrophe. These stories are often dismissed as myth. But myths often preserve memory when records do not. Spanish chroniclers arriving in the 16th century were stunned by Sacsayhuaman. Some wrote that the walls looked as though they had been built by demons, not men. Others claimed the stones were impossible to move with the tools they observed. Even the Inca themselves reportedly told the Spaniards that they had inherited parts of the site. That is a critical detail. Inherited, meaning not everything here was built by the Inca. Archaeologists have long debated this possibility. Some sections of Sacsayhuaman appear more refined than others. Some stones show signs of extreme weathering inconsistent with a 15th century origin. Could parts of the site be older? Could the Inca have built upon foundations laid by an earlier civilization? If so, who were they? No written language survives to answer that question. What remains are the stones themselves. And the stones tell a complicated story. Quarry sites exist miles away. Transporting blocks of this size would have required thousands of workers, ropes, ramps, and extraordinary coordination, all without wheels, metal tools, or draft animals capable of hauling such weight. But even transport does not explain shaping. How were these stones carved so precisely? How were internal angles measured? How were convex and concave surfaces matched so flawlessly that neighboring stones hug each other perfectly? Modern stone masons struggle to replicate this level of craftsmanship, even with power tools. And yet here it stands, silent, weathered, unyielding. There is also symbolism woven into the design. From above, the zigzag walls resemble the teeth of a puma, an animal sacred to the Inca, associated with power and protection. Cusco itself was said to be shaped like a puma, with Sacsayhuaman forming its head. This suggests deliberate planning on a scale larger than the site itself, an urban design infused with cosmology. Stone, land, and belief woven together. But belief alone does not move 200-ton blocks. Some researchers propose that the builders possessed advanced knowledge of leverage, friction reduction, and stone softening techniques, possibly using plant extracts or thermal methods now lost to time. These ideas remain unproven. But again, they persist because conventional explanations fall short. Standing before the walls, one senses intention beyond defense. These stones feel anchored, not just physically but symbolically. They are placed as if meant to endure catastrophe, as if the builders expected the ground to move, as if they were preparing for something. Earthquakes, social collapse, or something else entirely. As sunlight slides across the massive blocks, shadows emphasize their curves. Every joint, every angle, every interlock feels deliberate, not decorative, not excessive. Purposeful. This was not brute force. This was understanding. Understanding of stone. Understanding of movement. Understanding of time. And time has tested these walls relentlessly. They have endured conquest, colonization, looting, natural disaster. Still they stand. Which brings us to the most unsettling thought of all. What if the builders of Sacsayhuaman were not trying to impress their contemporaries? What if they were building for the future? For a time when their knowledge would be forgotten, but their work would remain. If that is true, then these walls are not just remnants of the past. They are messages. Messages written in stone, saying only this: we were here. We knew how to build. And we understood the world beneath our feet. As we step away from the fortress, looking back across the terraces and the valley below, one realization settles in quietly. History may forget names. It may lose languages. It may erase entire cultures. But stone remembers. And Sacsayhuaman remembers something we have yet to fully understand. As the Andes fade into the distance, and our journey prepares to move once more, a new question emerges, one that takes us back across the ocean again, to a small island where temples older than civilization itself still stand. Because our next destination will return us to Malta, but this time above ground, where massive stones rise without mortar, where temples align with the sun, and where the mystery of ancient knowledge refuses to stay buried. The temples older than time. As the towering stones of the Andes fade from view and the memory of Sacsayhuaman's unyielding walls lingers behind us, our journey circles back across the ocean, returning to a small island that has already whispered its secrets from beneath the earth. Malta. But this time we do not descend. We rise into the open air. Here, beneath a blazing Mediterranean sun, surrounded by scrubland, limestone, and the distant shimmer of the sea, stand structures so ancient that even the word civilization feels inadequate to describe the world that built them. These are the Maltese megalithic temples, and they should not exist, at least not according to the timeline we were taught. Long before the pyramids of Egypt, long before Stonehenge took shape, long before metal tools, wheels, or written language. Between roughly 3600 and 3000 BC, the people of Malta raised temples using stones weighing more than 20 tons, arranging them into complex, freestanding structures that have endured for over 5,000 years. Among them, Hagar Kim stands like a quiet defiance of history. At first glance, the temple appears simple: massive limestone slabs arranged in curved walls, doorways cut with surprising precision, chambers opening into one another like the rooms of a living body. But step closer, and the illusion of simplicity dissolves. These stones were not stacked randomly. They were shaped, balanced, aligned, without mortars, without metal, without machines. Some blocks stand taller than a person. Others weigh as much as modern trucks. Yet they rest securely, leaning into one another in a way that distributes weight and resists collapse. Earthquakes have shaken this island. Storms have battered it. Entire civilizations have risen and vanished around these stones. Still they stand. The temple's layout is deliberate. Curved walls guide movement inward. Central chambers draw attention toward specific focal points. Carved niches suggest ritual use. Stone altars hint at offerings, ceremonies, and beliefs long forgotten. And then there is the sun. At certain times of year, light enters the temple with astonishing precision. During solstices and equinoxes, sunlight passes through carefully positioned openings, illuminating specific stones deep within the structure. This was not accidental. It required observation, timing, understanding. It required generations of knowledge passed down without writing. How did Neolithic people, often described as simple farmers, track celestial cycles with such accuracy? How did they translate that knowledge into stone? And why did they choose to? The builders of Hagar Kim were not alone. Across Malta, other temples share similar designs, Mnajdra Tarxian Jiwith above Gantija. Each follows the same architectural language, curved apses, trilithon doorways, aligned chambers. This suggests a shared tradition, a shared worldview, and a shared body of knowledge that persisted for centuries. But here is where the mystery deepens. The civilization that built these temples vanished. No gradual decline, no clear signs of invasion, no evidence of assimilation. They simply disappeared. Their temples remained. Their tools remained. But the people themselves left no clear trace of what happened to them. Some researchers propose environmental collapse, soil exhaustion, drought, overpopulation. Others suggest disease or internal social breakdown. But none of these explanations fully account for the sudden end of a culture capable of such monumental achievements. And none explain why temple construction ceased entirely. The knowledge did not evolve. It stopped, as if something essential was lost. Standing among the stones, one cannot escape the sense that these temples were not merely places of worship. They were interfaces, spaces designed to connect humans with forces larger than themselves: the sun, the seasons, the cycles of life and death. The curved architecture amplifies sound. Voices resonate softly within the chambers, drumming echoes, chanting carries. Much like the hypogeum beneath the island, these above-ground temples appear designed to influence perception, to guide experience through sound, light, and movement. This raises an unsettling possibility. What if the Maltese temples and the hypogeum were part of the same system? One above ground, one below, both designed for ritual, both manipulating space and sensation. If so, then Malta preserves something rare, a complete ritual landscape, extending from the surface into the depths of the earth. And that suggests planning on a scale we rarely attribute to Neolithic societies. The stones themselves deepen the puzzle. Limestone is relatively soft when freshly quarried, but hardens over time. This means the builders may have shaped stones shortly after extraction, before they fully cured, a detail requiring intimate knowledge of material behavior. Was this knowledge learned through trial and error, or inherited from an earlier tradition? Some researchers note similarities between Maltese temples and megalithic sites in other parts of Europe. Shared proportions, shared orientations, shared emphasis on curved spaces and solar alignment. But there is no evidence of direct contact. No shared language. No shared tools. Which leaves only one explanation: independent rediscovery, or shared inheritance from a far older source. A body of knowledge passed down, fragmented, adapted, and eventually lost. As the afternoon sun shifts, shadows stretch across the temple floors. The stones seem to absorb the light, glowing softly. It is easy to imagine ceremonies unfolding here, processions, offerings, moments of silence as sunlight strikes stone with ritual precision. But it is equally easy to imagine something else. A warnings, because monuments like these do not arise in isolation. They arise when people believe the world itself is meaningful, when time, sky, and earth are part of a greater pattern. When that belief collapses, the monuments remain, but their purpose fades. Perhaps that is what happened here. The temples endured. The knowledge did not, and that loss echoes far beyond Malta, because similar patterns appear again and again across the ancient world. Sudden fluorescence, monumental construction, extraordinary precision, followed by disappearance, which leads us to an uncomfortable conclusion. What if advanced knowledge has risen and fallen multiple times in human history? What if we are not the first to forget? Standing among Malta's ancient stones, with the sea wind carrying the salt of countless centuries, one realization becomes impossible to ignore. These temples were not built by accident. They were built by people who understood their world deeply, who observed, measured, and encoded that understanding into stone. People whose names we no longer know, whose language we no longer speak, whose knowledge we no longer possess. And yet their work remains. As we leave Malta behind once more, the question follows us like a shadow. If such knowledge could be lost once, could it be lost again? Because our next destination will take us to a land where underground chambers were carved beneath painted walls, where art, astronomy, and burial merged into a single space. A place where color survived longer than memory, and where the dead were honored in ways that suggest a worldview far richer than history remembers. Our journey continues northward into the heart of ancient Thrace, the chamber where time paused. As the sunlit stones of Malta recede into memory and the Mediterranean fades beneath distant horizons, our journey moves north into the rolling hills and quiet valleys of southeastern Europe. Here in the heart of modern Bulgaria, the landscape feels deceptively gentle. Vineyards stretch across soft slopes. Low hills rise and fall with quiet rhythm. Nothing about this place announces the extraordinary. And yet beneath this calm surface, time has been sealed away. Hidden beneath an earthen mound near the town of Kazanlak lies a chamber carved not merely to bury the dead, but to preserve a worldview. This is the Thracian tomb of Kazanlak. From the outside, there is almost nothing to see. A grassy rise, a modest entrance, no towering walls, no grand facade. But step inside, and the world narrows. The air cools, light softens, color emerges. The tomb opens into a narrow corridor that leads to a perfectly circular burial chamber, capped by a beehive-shaped dome. The stone walls curve smoothly inward, creating a space that feels balanced, intentional, complete. And then you see them. Paintings, not fragments, not faded outlines, but vivid, expressive murals that have survived more than 2,300 years beneath the earth. Scenes of life unfold across the walls. A nobleman seated at a banquet, a woman beside him offering a gesture of intimacy. Servants approach with gifts. Horses charge forward, muscles tense, manets flowing. Figures move with grace, confidence, and purpose. These are not primitive drawings. They are composed, proportioned, alive. Archaeologists date the tomb to the 4th century BC, attributing it to the Thracians, a people often described in ancient texts as fierce warriors, tribal leaders, and enigmatic outsiders to Greek and Roman civilization. But the artistry inside this tomb challenges that stereotype completely. The paintings demonstrate advanced understanding of anatomy, perspective, and motion. Figures overlap naturally. Depth is suggested through subtle shading. Colors remain vibrant, reds, blues, yellows, applied with precision that rivals classical frescoes. This level of skill does not appear suddenly. It emerges from tradition, training, knowledge passed down. And that raises the first question. Where did this knowledge come from? The architecture itself deepens the mystery. The dome is not simply decorative. Its stones are arranged with geometric precision, distributing weight evenly across the structure. The circular chamber creates a sense of enclosure, of completeness, while the entrance corridor aligns in such a way that light enters the tomb at specific times. Some researchers believe the tomb was aligned to celestial cycles, moments when sunlight would briefly illuminate the chamber, marking transitions between seasons or ceremonial dates. If true, this suggests the builders possessed astronomical knowledge, not written but practiced. Symbolism is everywhere. The banquet scene likely represents the afterlife, a continuation of earthly pleasures beyond death. The presence of horses suggests status, power, and movement between worlds. The dome itself may symbolize the sky, the heavens enclosing the soul. This was not just a tomb. It was a statement, a carefully constructed message about life, death, and continuity. But there is something even more unsettling. The tomb feels finished. Perfect. Not rushed. Not provisional. It was designed to endure. And it has. Despite earthquakes, despite centuries of burial, despite moisture and time. The materials used, stone, plaster, pigment, were selected carefully. The techniques employed ensured longevity. This was not accidental preservation. It was intentional. Which leads to a deeper question. Why invest such effort into a space no one was meant to see again? Unlike temples or public monuments, this chamber was sealed shortly after completion. The paintings were not meant for crowds. They were not meant to impress the living. They were meant for something else. Or someone else. Perhaps the gods. Perhaps the ancestors. Perhaps the dead themselves. But even that explanation feels incomplete. Because the tomb also feels instructional. Like a memory frozen in stone. As if the builders wanted to preserve not just a body, but a way of seeing the world. The Thracians left few written records. Much of what we know about them comes from outsiders, Greeks and Romans who often misunderstood or dismissed their culture. But here in this sealed chamber, the Thracians speak for themselves. They show us a society that valued beauty, balance, ceremony, continuity. A society capable of advanced engineering and sophisticated art. A society whose knowledge rivaled that of its more famous neighbors. And yet, like so many others in this journey, the Thracians faded. Their cities vanished. Their language disappeared. Their traditions dissolved into the cultures that followed. But their stone remained. Their art endured. And their tomb waits. Standing inside the chamber, the sensation is almost uncomfortable. The murals feel close, intimate, as if the figures are aware of being observed. Time feels compressed. The gap between ancient and modern narrows. And that is when another realization emerges. This tomb is not isolated. Across the ancient world, similar structures appear, subterranean chambers adorned with symbolic art, aligned with the heavens, designed to preserve identity beyond death. From Egypt to Anatolia, from Malta to the Balkans, different cultures, different beliefs, yet strikingly similar intentions. This suggests something profound. That ancient civilizations shared not just techniques, but questions. Questions about mortality, about the soul, about the relationship between earth and sky. And they encoded those questions into architecture. Stone became memory. Paint became meaning. Geometry became belief. As we step back out into the daylight, leaving the painted chamber sealed once more beneath its earthen mound, the world feels louder, brighter, faster. But something lingers. A sense that ancient people understood something about legacy that we have forgotten. They did not assume their knowledge would last. So they carved it into places meant to survive collapse. Underground, hidden, protected, which leads us to an unsettling thought. How many such chambers remain undiscovered? How many stories lie sealed beneath our feet, waiting for someone to listen? Because our next destination will take us back to Egypt, not to pyramids or temples, but to a cliff face carved with hundreds of tombs. a place where daily life was etched into stone with astonishing realism, where knowledge was preserved not in myth, but in motion. And what we find there will challenge our assumptions about art, engineering, and memory itself. The walls that remembered daily life. As we return once more to Egypt, leaving behind the quiet hills of Thrace and their sealed chambers of color and silence, the landscape opens wide again. The Nile stretches long and patient through the desert. The cliffs rise pale and watchful along its banks. And history feels close, not buried, but carved openly into the stone. Near the modern city of Minya, along the eastern bank of the river, a sheer limestone cliff bears a series of dark openings like watchful eyes. From a distance, they look unremarkable. Simple cuts in the rock, shadows against pale stone. But step closer, and those shadows reveal depth. Corridors, pillars, entire halls carved directly into the living cliff. This is Beni Hassan, a vast rock-cut necropolis dating to Egypt's Middle Kingdom, roughly between 2000 and 1800 BC, a time often overshadowed by the grandeur of the Old and New Kingdoms. Yet what lies here challenges that oversight. Because Beni Hassan is not a place of gods and kings. It is a place of people, provincial governors, administrators, officials who ruled Egypt's heartland. And inside their tombs, they left behind something rare. Not just prayers for the afterlife, but life itself. As you enter the tombs, the temperature drops. The air becomes still. Stone pillars rise from the floor with quiet authority, evenly spaced, smoothly carved, supporting ceilings that extend deep into the cliff face. These chambers are vast. Some stretch more than 30 meters inward, carved with such precision that the walls remain straight, the ceilings level, and the corners sharp, despite being shaped with copper tools and stone implements. That alone raises questions. How were these spaces measured without modern surveying tools? How were angles maintained over such distances? How was collapse avoided in soft limestone? But it is the walls that demand your attention. They are alive. Scenes unfold in painted relief across the stone, not of gods descending from the heavens, but of ordinary human activity rendered with extraordinary skill. Men wrestling, farmers plowing fields, artisans crafting goods, musicians playing instruments, soldiers training, caravans arriving from distant lands. Every figure is in motion. Muscles strain, bodies twist, gestures feel immediate, almost modern. These are not symbolic stick figures. They are anatomically aware, proportioned, expressive. In some wrestling scenes, dozens of distinct holds and techniques are depicted, so accurately that modern wrestlers can identify them. This level of detail is not decorative. It is instructional, and that raises an unsettling question. Why preserve this? Why carve daily life into tomb walls with such care? The official explanation is straightforward. These scenes were meant to ensure the continuation of earthly activities in the afterlife. What the tomb owner enjoyed in life would be recreated beyond death. But that explanation feels incomplete, because this is not selective idealization. This is documentation. It captures technique, motion, and practice. It records how people moved, worked, trained, and lived, almost as if the builders feared these things might be forgotten. The artistic consistency across the tombs is striking. Proportions remain uniform. Styles remain cohesive. The same visual language appears again and again, suggesting standardized training and shared methods passed between artisans. This implies organization, and organization implies systems. Behind every tomb stands not just a patron, but a network of skilled workers, planners, stonecutters, painters, all coordinating with remarkable precision. The architecture itself reinforces this. Columns are cut with consistent diameter and spacing. Ceilings are reinforced subtly through curvature and alignment. Even the placement of pillars seems calculated to distribute weight safely through the cliff. This is not improvisation. This is engineering. Some tombs feature false doors carved with precision, symbolic gateways between worlds. Others contain niches aligned with cardinal directions, possibly reflecting cosmological beliefs. And then there is the question of time. Many of these tombs have survived nearly 4,000 years. Earthquakes, erosion, flooding, human interference. Yet the chambers remain stable. The paintings remain legible. The structure endures, which suggests that Middle Kingdom builders understood their materials intimately, how limestone behaves, where it fractures, how it holds. This knowledge was not accidental. It was accumulated, refined, passed down, and yet, like so many sites we have encountered, it seems to vanish later. The artistic realism seen at Beni Hassan is not consistently replicated in later periods. Some techniques appear to fade, some knowledge fragments. Why? Why does human capability rise, peak, and then simplify? Standing inside one of the tombs, watching sunlight spill faintly across painted figures frozen in mid-motion, the sensation is uncanny. This is not mythic Egypt. This is human Egypt. A society confident enough in its understanding to record itself honestly, to preserve movement, labor, and technique. It feels almost like a message, a reminder, as if the builders knew that one day someone would stand here centuries later and try to understand who they were. And that thought leads to a deeper realization. Beni Hassan does not glorify conquest. It does not exalt gods above all else. It preserves knowledge of practice, how to wrestle, how to farm, how to organize, how to train, in other words, how to live. Which raises a provocative question. What if some ancient monuments were not built merely to honor the dead, but to preserve human knowledge through time? Not in books, not in scrolls, but in stone. Stone that could endure collapse. Stone that could outlast fire. Stone that could wait patiently for rediscovery. If that is true, then Beni Hassan is not just a cemetery. It is an archive, a stone record of human capability at a moment in history when knowledge was strong, organized, and confident. And yet, as history moved forward, something changed. Empires rose. Monuments grew larger. But realism faded. Documentation simplified. Precision narrowed. Knowledge became ritualized rather than recorded. As we step back out into the Egyptian sun, leaving the carved cliffs behind us, the contrast is striking. The modern world feels fast, noisy, ephemeral. The tombs feel deliberate, enduring, patient, and that patience echoes a theme we have seen again and again. Ancient people were not always building for their present. They were building for a future they would never see. A future where their knowledge might be questioned, or forgotten, or misunderstood. As the Nile flows quietly past the cliffs of Beni Hassan, carrying silt and memory alike, one truth becomes clear. History is not only written by victors. Sometimes it is carved by planners, by teachers, by people who understood that stone remembers when words do not. And as our journey continues, that truth will take us next to a land where a single arch, built of brick, not stone, defied gravity on a scale that should have been impossible. A place where engineering reached a peak that has never quite been matched again. Our path now turns east, to the ruins of an empire once feared across the ancient world. And there, rising alone on the plain, waits a structure that still asks the same quiet question. How did they know how to do this? The arch that should not still be standing. As the painted walls of Beni Hassan fade into the desert light and the Nile's quiet persistence slips behind us, our journey turns eastward, toward a land where empires once collided, where armies marched, and where engineering was pushed to its absolute edge. Here, in the dry plains of modern-day Iraq, near the ruins of an ancient capital that once rivaled Rome itself, a single structure still rises against the sky. It stands alone. No protective complex. No surrounding palace. No supporting walls. Just one vast curve of brick suspended in space. This is the Arch of Ctesiphon, also known as Tak Kasra. And it should not exist. From a distance, the arch appears almost unreal. A massive parabolic vault soaring more than 37 meters high, spanning over 25 meters wide, constructed entirely of baked brick and mortar. No steel reinforcement. No concrete core. No modern support. Just brick and gravity. According to mainstream history, the arch was built in the 6th century AD during the reign of Khosrow I, ruler of the Sasanian Empire. It served as the grand entrance to a vast imperial palace, a statement of power meant to awe visitors and intimidate rivals. And it does. Even in its ruined state, the arch feels overwhelming. The curve rises smoothly from the ground, narrowing as it climbs, creating a sense of motion, as if the structure is still reaching upward. But the deeper question is not why it was built. It is how. Brick is strong under compression, but weak under tension. Large spans typically require reinforcement or layered support. Ancient builders knew this, which is why most arches of the era were modest in size or heavily buttressed. This arch is neither. Its span is enormous. Its walls are thick but not excessive. Its curve is precise, not decorative but structural. Modern engineers who study Tak Kasra often pause at the same conclusion. This structure represents a level of understanding that feels almost anachronistic for its time. The arch was built without scaffolding as we understand it today. Evidence suggests it was constructed using a gradual, inclined formwork technique, bricks laid at precise angles so that each layer supported the next. One miscalculation would have caused collapse. One deviation in curvature would have redistributed forces unevenly. One failure in mortar composition would have weakened the entire structure. Yet it stands, 14 centuries later. Through earthquakes, floods, wars, neglect, empires rose and fell around it. The palace it once anchored collapsed, but the arch remained. That alone demands attention. The Sasanian Empire was not known primarily for monumental architecture on this scale. They were administrators, military strategists, and engineers, but this arch exceeds what we see elsewhere in their surviving structures. Which raises a familiar question. Was this a singular achievement, or the last echo of a broader tradition? The proportions of the arch are mathematically elegant. Its parabolic curve distributes weight evenly, channeling force downward and outward into the ground. This is not guesswork. It is calculation. But where did that calculation come from? There are no surviving blueprints, no construction manuals, no inscriptions explaining technique. Just brick laid atop brick, forming a shape that modern architects still study. Some scholars believe the builders inherited knowledge from earlier Mesopotamian traditions, centuries of accumulated experience, with vaults, domes, and arches dating back to Babylonian times. Others suggest the arch represents a peak, a moment when empirical understanding, passed down orally and through apprenticeship, culminated in something extraordinary, and then vanished. Because after Tak Kasra, we do not see another brick arch of this scale attempted for centuries. Why? If the knowledge existed, why wasn't it repeated? Was it too risky? too dependent on rare expertise? Or did something disrupt the transmission of that knowledge? Standing beneath the arch, the sense of scale is humbling. The curve towers overhead, dwarfing the human form completely. Light filters in through gaps where the palace once connected, casting shifting shadows across the brickwork. Look closely, and you'll notice subtle variations in brick size and placement, not flaws, but adjustments. Micro-corrections made by builders who understood that materials are not perfect, and that architecture must respond to reality. This is not rigid design. It is adaptive intelligence. The mortar itself adds another layer of mystery. Its composition has allowed it to survive centuries of weathering, binding bricks together with resilience that modern reproductions struggle to match. What ingredients were used? What ratios? What techniques ensured durability? Some of that knowledge has been lost. And with it, the confidence to build like this again. Tak Kasra feels like a threshold, a boundary between what was known and what was forgotten. It marks the end of something. Just as Rome fell not long after, so too did the continuity of certain engineering traditions. The world entered a period where structures grew smaller, simpler, safer. Innovation slowed. Ambition narrowed. And then, centuries later, humanity had to relearn what had once been obvious. That pattern should feel familiar by now. We've seen it again and again. Monumental capability appears, reaches extraordinary heights, then fragments, then disappears. And all that remains are questions. Standing here, one cannot help but imagine the builders themselves, artisans and engineers who trusted their understanding deeply enough to attempt the impossible. They did not have equations written on paper. They had experience, observation, knowledge embedded in hands and eyes. When those hands stopped building, when those eyes closed, the knowledge faded, and the arch remained. As the sun lowers toward the horizon, the curve of Tak Kasra glows warm against the sky. The surrounding ruins blur into shadow. The arch becomes the sole survivor, a reminder of a moment when human confidence in materials and geometry reached astonishing heights. And then fell silent. As we turn away from the arch, another realization settles in. Stone is not the only medium ancient people used to preserve knowledge. Brick, paint, geometry, alignment, all served the same purpose: to carry understanding across time. And sometimes they succeeded. Because our next destination will take us to a place where one single stone, larger than anything we have yet encountered, was cut, moved, and placed with precision that still defies explanation. A stone so massive that even modern machinery struggles to comprehend it. And its presence will force us to confront one final, uncomfortable question. How much of ancient engineering have we truly recovered? And how much remains lost beneath the weight of time? The stone that should not exist. As the great arch of Ctesiphon fades into the dust of Mesopotamia, its impossible curve lingering in the mind like an unfinished equation, our journey moves west, toward a city layered so deeply with history that time itself feels compressed. Jerusalem, a city where stones do not merely mark the past. They carry it. Here, beneath sacred hills and centuries of prayer, lies one of the most astonishing single-building stones ever cut, moved, and set by ancient hands. It is not elevated on a pedestal. It does not stand alone as a monument. Most people walk past it without realizing what they are seeing. And yet, once you notice it, you cannot unsee it. Embedded deep within the retaining wall of the Temple Mount lies what is known as the Western Stone. It is colossal, measuring over 13 meters in length, nearly 4 meters in height, and estimated to be more than 4 meters deep. This single limestone block weighs between 500 and 600 tons. That is not a mistake. One stone, 1,000 tons, carefully quarried, precisely shaped, and placed perfectly in a wall that has endured earthquakes, sieges, and millennia of human activity. Standing beside it, scale collapses. Your body becomes the wrong size for the environment. The stone dominates the senses, not just visually but psychologically. It does not feel like a building block. It feels like bedrock. Except it is. According to mainstream history, the Western stone was installed during the reign of Herod the Great around 19 BC, as part of the massive expansion of the Second Temple complex. Herod's engineers enlarged the Temple Mount by constructing enormous retaining walls, transforming the natural hill into a vast artificial platform. The project was ambitious, but this stone goes beyond ambition. It borders on defiance. Herodian builders were skilled. They employed cranes, levers, rollers, and coordinated labor on a massive scale. Many large stones from this period remain visible, impressive, but understandable. This stone is different. Its size exceeds what even advanced Roman-era cranes were typically designed to handle. Moving it would have required extraordinary planning, leverage, and precision, not only to transport it from the quarry, but to place it exactly where it now rests. And it was not placed at ground level. It sits several meters above the foundation base, locked into position among other stones with seams so tight they appear fused. No mortar binds it. No metal anchors secure it. It relies solely on gravity, geometry, and precision, which raises the question that refuses to go away. Why? Why use a stone of this size at all? Smaller blocks could have achieved the same structural purpose. Roman and Herodian engineers knew this. They used modular construction everywhere else. So why here? Why choose the most difficult option? Some scholars argue the stone was meant as a statement, a demonstration of power, wealth, and divine favor. A way of saying, we can do what others cannot. That explanation carries weight. But it does not explain everything. Because statements are usually visible, this stone is hidden in plain sight. Most of it remains underground. If this was meant to impress, why bury it? Why place the largest stone where few would ever see it? Unless its purpose was not symbolic, but foundational. Some researchers have suggested that the massive stones of the Temple Mount were designed to stabilize the entire platform, to anchor it against seismic activity, erosion, and time. Jerusalem sits in a tectonically active region. Earthquakes have struck repeatedly throughout history. Large, interlocking stones resist movement better than smaller blocks. This explanation makes sense, but it still leaves one problem. Even by seismic standards, this stone is excessive. And then there is the quarry. Less than a kilometer from the Temple Mount lies the ancient quarry where these stones were cut. There, another monolith remains partially detached from the bedrock, larger even than the Western stone. Estimated at over 600 tons, it lies abandoned, its edges clean, its form precise. The builders clearly knew how to cut such stones, but for some reason they stopped. Why? Was the stone too heavy to move? Did conditions change? Did knowledge fail? Or was it never meant to be moved at all? Standing in the quarry, tool marks are visible. Deliberate, confident, these were not experiments. They were instructions carried out by people who understood what they were doing. Until they didn't. The mystery deepens when we consider the Temple Mount itself. Beneath the platform lies a vast network of substructures, halls, arches, vaults, and retaining walls, many built from stones rivaling the Western stone in size and precision. Some sections appear stylistically different from Herodian construction. Some stones show weathering inconsistent with their supposed age. This has led some researchers to suggest that Herod may have inherited parts of the platform. That earlier builders laid foundations, he later expanded and refined. If true, then the Western stone may not represent the peak of Herodian engineering, but the continuation of something older, something already there. That idea is controversial, but it persists because Jerusalem is not a city built once. It is a city built over, layer upon layer, culture upon culture, foundation upon foundation. And sometimes, later builders preserve what they do not fully understand because it works, because it endures. Standing beside the Western stone, fingers tracing the smooth limestone surface, one cannot escape a sense of intentional permanence. This stone was meant to stay. Not for decades, not for centuries, for ages. It does not bear inscriptions. It does not tell stories. It does not announce its builders. It simply exists. And in doing so, it asks a question no historian has fully answered. What level of knowledge did ancient builders possess when it came to stone? Not theory, not symbolism, but practice. Knowledge passed through hands, through repetition, through observation. Knowledge that does not always leave records, but leaves results. As sunlight fades across Jerusalem and shadows climb the ancient walls, the Western stone remains unmoved, unbothered, unchallenged. Empires have come and gone. Faiths have risen and divided. The city has burned and been rebuilt. And still that stone holds. As we step away from the Temple Mount, one realization settles quietly but firmly. This stone is not an anomaly. It is part of a pattern we have seen across continents and cultures. Massive stones, extreme precision, methods that exceed written explanations, knowledge that appears suddenly and vanishes just as quietly. And that pattern leads us to our next destination. Because beneath this sacred platform lies something even more unsettling, a hidden world of chambers and passages, carved and constructed with the same monumental precision. A place few have seen, and fewer still understand. Our journey now descends beneath Jerusalem itself, into darkness, into silence, into foundations that may be far older than the city above. The foundations that were never meant to be seen. As the massive Western stone recedes behind us, its silent weight pressing against centuries of belief and history, our journey does not move outward across land or sea. It moves downward, beneath the crowded streets of Jerusalem, beneath prayer stones worn smooth by countless hands, beneath layers of faith, conflict, and memory. There is another world, a hidden world, one that was never meant to be admired, only to hold everything else up. This is the underground of the Temple Mount, and what lies here challenges even the most careful explanations of ancient engineering. Descending into the subterranean passages, the air grows cool and still. Light fades quickly. Footsteps echo softly against stone walls that feel impossibly thick. Corridors stretch forward with deliberate alignment. Massive blocks form walls so smooth and precisely fitted that seems nearly vanish. Arches rise overhead, distributing unimaginable weight with calm efficiency. These are not tunnels carved in desperation. They are architectural systems. Vaulted halls, load-bearing chambers, carefully graded floors, drainage channels cut with intent, and everywhere stone. Huge stone. Some blocks weigh dozens of tons. Others rival the Western stone itself in scale and precision. They sit perfectly aligned, locked into place without mortar, relying solely on gravity and geometry. Mainstream archaeology attributes much of this subterranean construction to Herod the Great's expansion of the Second Temple complex in the 1st century BC. According to this narrative, engineers reinforced the platform by carving bedrock and constructing massive retaining systems beneath it. That explanation accounts for some of what we see. But not all of it, because not all of these structures match Herodian style. Some stones are cut differently. Some chambers are aligned in ways that do not correspond to the temple above. Some walls show weathering inconsistent with their supposed age. This has led to a quiet but persistent question. Were all these foundations built at the same time? Or were they inherited? The Temple Mount is not a single construction project. It is a palimpsest, a surface written over again and again, each culture adding to what came before, sometimes without fully understanding it. In some chambers, the stonework is so refined that even modern engineers pause. Blocks fit together with such precision that thermal expansion leaves no visible gap. Angles are exact, corners are square. And yet there are no inscriptions here. No reliefs. No decoration. This architecture was never meant to be seen. Which is exactly why it matters. Because people do not invest their greatest effort into things they do not understand. The underground halls were built to endure pressure, not admiration. To resist collapse, not inspire awe. To support unimaginable weight quietly. That requires deep understanding of material behavior, of stress, of load distribution, of stone. Standing in one of the larger chambers, it becomes clear just how much weight these structures carry. Above lies the massive platform of the Temple Mount, one of the largest artificial platforms of the ancient world. Thousands of tons of stone, centuries of construction, millions of footsteps, and beneath it all silence. The foundations hold, and they have held through earthquakes, sieges, destruction, and rebuilding. That endurance raises an unsettling possibility. What if some of these foundations predate the temple itself? What if later builders simply built on top of something they found, something that already worked? This idea is not new. Ancient texts occasionally reference earlier sacred platforms. Some traditions speak of primordial foundations, places chosen long before recorded history. Archaeological evidence is limited, largely due to restricted access and political sensitivity. Much of the underground remains unexplored. But what has been documented suggests complexity beyond a single construction phase. In some sections, tunnels appear to lead nowhere. Chambers end abruptly. Walls curve in unexpected directions. Were these incomplete projects, or remnants of an older layout now partially obscured? The lack of clarity fuels speculation. Some researchers believe the underground structures were designed not only to support the temple above, but to control access, creating hidden pathways, storage spaces, and secure areas beneath the sacred precinct. Others suggest ritual functions, spaces reserved for initiates, priests, or sacred objects. But there is another possibility, that these foundations represent a knowledge layer, a baseline of engineering preserved and reused across generations. A silent inheritance, because once something works, truly works, there is no reason to change it. And stone that holds weight does not announce its age. It simply holds. As we move deeper into the passages, the sense of scale becomes overwhelming. Walls stretch upward into darkness. Vaults curve gracefully overhead. The stone feels ancient, not old, but settled. As if it has been here far longer than memory suggests. The air is still. Sound dampens quickly. It feels like being inside the Earth's ribcage, protected, enclosed, and utterly removed from the surface world. And that separation matters. Above, Jerusalem is chaos. Below, everything is controlled, measured, balanced, intentional. This contrast reflects something we've seen again and again throughout our journey. Ancient builders often reserved their greatest precision for what could not be seen. For foundations, for subterranean spaces, for structures meant to endure when everything else failed. Which leads to a realization, both humbling and unsettling. We often judge civilizations by what they displayed: temples, statues, monuments. But perhaps their true mastery lay beneath, in the hidden systems that allowed everything else to exist, in knowledge that did not need to be admired, only trusted. And trust in ancient architecture meant survival. Standing in these underground halls, one cannot escape the feeling that this place was designed with future destruction in mind. That the builders knew the surface would change. New empires would fall. New structures would be rebuilt, but trusted that the foundations would remain. And they were right. The Temple Mount has been destroyed, rebuilt, expanded, and repurposed countless times. The foundations remain. Which brings us to the final, unavoidable question. How many ancient structures rest on foundations we do not fully understand? How much of human knowledge lies beneath our feet, unseen, uncelebrated, but essential? As we ascend slowly back toward the surface, light returns in fragments. The modern world intrudes once more. But something has shifted. Because now, when we look at ancient monuments, we know where to look. Not at what rises, but at what lies beneath. And that understanding brings us to the end of this journey. Because our final destination is not a single place. It is a question that ties together walls, temples, tombs, arches, cities, and stones across the world. A question about knowledge, how it rises, how it is lost, and how it survives. And in the final part, we will confront that question directly. Not with answers, but with perspective. What the stones were trying to tell us. As we emerge from beneath the foundations of Jerusalem, from the silent halls that were never meant to be seen, our journey finally slows. Not because the questions have been answered, but because they can no longer be ignored. Across deserts, mountains, islands, valleys, and cities, we have followed a pattern written not in ink but in stone. Walls that defy earthquakes, temples carved from living rock, cities hidden beneath the earth, foundations laid with precision beyond necessity. Stones so massive they challenge even modern machinery. And everywhere the same unsettling rhythm appears. Extraordinary capability, sudden emergence, enduring construction, then disappearance. What we have not seen is gradual progress. We do not see crude attempts evolving neatly into mastery. Instead, we see peaks, moments where human knowledge seems fully formed, confident, precise, ambitious, followed not by improvement but by loss. This is the uncomfortable truth hidden beneath our monuments. History, as we often imagine it, is not a straight line. It is a cycle. Knowledge rises. Knowledge concentrates. Knowledge is encoded into stone. Then knowledge fragments. Civilizations fall. But stone remembers. The builders of Baalbek did not leave manuals explaining how they moved their stones. The artisans of colossal did not record how they visualized an entire temple before carving it free. The engineers of Ctesiphon did not write down the equations that held their arch aloft. The planners of Malta did not explain how they aligned stone with sun and sound. They did not need to. They trusted that what they built would speak for itself. And it has, but only partially. Because stone can preserve results, not reasoning. It shows what was done, not how it was known. And that is where modern understanding struggles. We measure ancient achievements against modern tools and assume superiority. But tools are not knowledge. Knowledge lives in experience, in repetition, in traditions passed hand to hand, eye to eye, master to apprentice. And when those chains break, through collapse, disaster, or cultural rupture, the knowledge vanishes even if the structures remain. This explains something that has haunted our journey from the beginning. Why ancient builders so often chose the hardest possible methods. Why they moved the largest stones. why they carved from single masses, why they built underground, why they obsessed over foundations. They were not showing off. They were ensuring survival. Stone does not argue. Stone does not adapt. Stone does not forget. If knowledge was at risk of being lost, stone was the safest place to put it. Not as instructions, but as proof. Proof that something had once been understood. And this brings us to the most important realization of all. Ancient monuments are not mysteries because ancient people were incapable. They are mysteries because ancient people were capable in ways we no longer practice. We inherited their structures, but not their mindset. Modern engineering relies on abstraction. Ancient engineering relied on intimacy. They knew stone because they lived with it. They understood land because they read it. They aligned with sky because they watched it. Their knowledge was not written, it was embodied. And embodiment is fragile. It does not survive conquest. It does not survive displacement. It does not survive cultural erasure, which is why so many ancient cultures appear to vanish abruptly. Not because they were destroyed completely, but because their knowledge systems were. What remained were shells, temples without priests, cities without citizens, foundations without builders. And then came us. We inherited the ruins and wrote stories around them. Sometimes accurate, sometimes incomplete, sometimes comforting, but rarely humble, because humility would require admitting something difficult. That progress is not guaranteed. That knowledge is not permanent. That forgetting is as human as discovery. Standing at the end of this journey, surrounded by the accumulated weight of stone across continents and millennia, one question becomes unavoidable. What do our monuments say about us? We build tall. We build fast. We build visible. But how much of what we build is meant to endure without maintenance? How much of our knowledge is embodied rather than recorded? How much could survive collapse? The ancient builders we have encountered did not assume continuity. They assumed fragility. That assumption shaped everything they made. And it may be the greatest lesson they left behind. Not that they were more advanced, but that they were more cautious, more aware of loss, more focused on endurance than convenience. Perhaps that is why their work still stands. Because it was never meant to serve only the present. It was meant to outlast it. As we step back and look at the world with fresh eyes, the monuments no longer feel like anomalies. They feel like messages. Not messages saying we were gods, but messages saying, we learned something. We shaped it into stone, and we hoped it would survive us. The mystery is not whether ancient people were capable of greatness. They clearly were. The mystery is whether we are capable of listening. Because stone speaks slowly. It does not shout. It waits, and it has been waiting a very long time. For us to stop asking how these things were built, and start asking why.